Number 10. Ford Pinto. More than 3 million Americans bought a Ford Pinto. Most of them had no idea the car would become one of the most controversial vehicles in automotive history. In 1974, more than 544,000 were sold, making it one of the best-selling American cars of the year, a year when fuel prices made economy the single most important purchase criterion for a significant portion of the country. The safety record that emerged from crash testing and the internal cost-benefit analysis later revealed through civil litigation gave the Pinto a historical identity that its sales figures alone would never have produced. Before that identity became the defining fact of its legacy, the Pinto was simply everywhere. In apartment parking lots, at high school curbs, in the driveways of families for whom $2,000 was the most consequential number in any automotive transaction. More than 3 million were sold across its production run. The Pinto is at number 10 not because its legacy is comfortable, it is not, but because 3 million purchase decisions across a decade make it inseparable from what the 1970s American road looked like. Number 8. Volkswagen Beetle. By 1970, the Volkswagen Beetle was no longer just a car, it was a cultural symbol. Students drove them, families owned them, and millions could identify one instantly from a block away. In that year, Volkswagen sold 569,696 cars in the United States, of which approximately 405,615 were Beetles, one of the most visible vehicles on American roads at the start of the decade. The Beetle's position in the early 1970s was unlike any other cars. It had arrived in the 1950s as an economy choice and accumulated through the 1960s an identity that extended far beyond transportation, appearing on album covers, in counterculture publications, and in the driveways of buyers making a statement as much as a purchase. The air-cooled engine required no coolant system, parts were inexpensive, fuel economy was excellent by the standards of a decade reminded of what oil supply disruption felt like. American Beetle sales declined through the mid-1970s as the Japanese competition improved and Volkswagen's pricing rose with exchange rates. The last Beetles were sold in the American market in 1977. Across the first half of the 1970s, no imported car was more deeply embedded in American life. Number 8. Plymouth Duster. Plymouth's product planners were given $15 million to update the Valiant for 1970. Nobody told them they couldn't use that budget to design a completely new rear end. The fastback coupe they created sold 217,192 units in its first year and went on to sell 1.3 million across its production run, peaking at 281,378 in 1974 alone. The Duster occupied a specific and well-timed position in the American market. At a base price of $2,172, it delivered the Valiant's proven slant-six reliability in a body that looked like it cost considerably more. The 1973 oil crisis accelerated rather than diminished its sales, as buyers who wanted economy without giving up the styling of a car they were proud to park in the driveway found in the Duster exactly that combination. How Stuff Works documented the Duster's cultural presence with a precision that sales figures confirm. Sooner or later, almost everyone owned a Duster or knew someone who did. The Duster is at number 8 because 3 million units across 7 production years earns its place on any list of the cars that defined what Americans drove in the decade.
Number 7. Honda Civic. The first Honda Civic arrived in the United States in 1972. Weighing approximately 1,500 pounds and producing around 50 horsepower. It did not look like a car that would change what American buyers expected from a small car. It turned out to be exactly that. Fuel efficiency was immediately relevant. The Civic arrived 2 years before the 1973 oil crisis and remained a commercial argument for the entire remainder of the decade. The CVCC engine, introduced in 1975, allowed the Civic to meet American emissions standards without a catalytic converter, a solution that American manufacturers were simultaneously struggling to implement without destroying performance. Consumer Reports rated the Civic among the most reliable cars available in the American market across the late 1970s. The Civic did not sell in the volumes of the Cutlass or the Impala. It did something more consequential in the long run. It demonstrated to American buyers, year by year, that a small car could be engineered with seriousness rather than compromise, and helped redefine what Americans expected from a small car for the decades that followed. Number 6. AMC Gremlin. AMC launched the Gremlin on April 1, 1970, April Fool's Day, as the first American-built subcompact, beating the Ford Pinto to market by several months. The date was either an accident or the most self-aware product launch in automotive history. Either way, the car that arrived was genuine, a shortened Hornet platform, a minimal rear treatment, and the specific kind of economy car honesty that said nothing about luxury and everything about price. The Gremlin did what AMC needed it to do. It gave domestic preference buyers a reason to choose an AMC showroom over a Volkswagen dealership. It sold for 8 years in volumes that sustained a manufacturer whose engineering and tooling budget was a fraction of Ford's or GM's. Its interior communicated its price rather than obscuring it, which in retrospect was more honest than many of the decade's more expensive products. The Gremlin is at number 6 because the cars above it on this list reached more driveways and stayed in them longer. It is here because it was the car that announced on April 1st that the American compact era was genuinely underway. Number 5. Ford Maverick. Ford launched the Maverick in 1970 at a base price of $1995 and made that number the center of every advertisement. At that price, the Maverick outsold the Mustang in its debut year, establishing itself immediately as one of the most commercially effective domestic economy cars of the decade. Total North American production reached approximately 2.1 million units across 8 years, a volume that placed the Maverick among the decade's most significant commercial products. The 1973 oil crisis strengthened rather than damaged its sales, as buyers reconsidered larger vehicles at the pump and found in the Maverick exactly the kind of simple, affordable domestic option they were looking for. The platform was borrowed from the 1960 Falcon, the interior reflected its price, and the quality record that emerged over ownership years confirmed that Ford had built it aggressively to a price point. But in American driveways of the early and mid-1970s, the Maverick was the car that started every morning without drama and cost as little as possible to own, which was, for many families, exactly the right car at exactly the right moment.
Number 4. Toyota Corolla. The Toyota Corolla did not arrive in the 1970s as a novelty. It arrived as a product whose reliability record had already begun building the reputation that would make it, by the end of the decade, the best-selling nameplate in the world. American buyers who chose the Corolla in the early 1970s were making a practical decision. A compact with better fuel economy than most domestic alternatives, a reliability record that Consumer Reports documented consistently above the American compact class average, and a resale value that reflected what the ownership record made plausible. The 1973 oil crisis accelerated the Corolla's American sales significantly, but unlike some imports that benefited only temporarily from the crisis, the Corolla retained its buyers through the second half of the decade on the strength of its record. By 1979, American buyers had begun to associate Japanese cars with a reliability standard that domestic manufacturers had not matched. The Corolla, more consistently than any other single model, was the vehicle through which that association was built in the mainstream American market. Number 3. Chevrolet Nova. The Chevrolet Nova may be the single most overlooked car on any list of the 1970s. Not because it was unusual, but because it was so consistently ordinary that its ubiquity became invisible. It occupied the compact segment of the Chevrolet lineup at a price that made it accessible to buyers who wanted a domestic car without economy car compromises. The inline-6 and small-block V8 options gave it flexibility from basic commuter transportation to the mild performance of the SS trim. Parts were inexpensive, dealers knew it, and nothing about owning one challenged any general practice shop in any part of the country. The Nova was the car in the neighbor's driveway, the car the older sibling drove to work, the car parked outside every apartment building and strip mall in the country for the entire decade. Its absence from most retrospective discussions of the 1970s reflects how completely its ordinariness concealed its scale, which was, throughout the decade, enormous. There's no shortage of Novas in photographs of American life in the 1970s. There is a shortage of people who remember seeing them because their presence was simply too constant to register as remarkable. Number 2. Oldsmobile Cutlass. The Oldsmobile Cutlass led American sales in 1975 and 1976 and remained among the top sellers for most of the decade. By the mid-1970s, the Cutlass accounted for more than 40% of Oldsmobile's total sales volume, a concentration that reflected how completely a single nameplate had come to define a brand. The Cutlass worked across buyer segments in ways that most cars do not. Available from the base Cutlass Supreme Coupe to the 442 Performance variant, it covered enough of the market to appear in suburban driveways alongside ranch houses and in urban parking garages with equal plausibility. The 350 cubic inch V8 that powered most configurations provided the performance American buyers expected in the mid-decade years when emissions regulations had softened the competition's outputs. The 1978 Cutlass sold approximately 520,000 units, among the highest volume single model years of the decade for any nameplate. The Cutlass was not a car that attracted enthusiasts or generated strong opinions. It was a car people owned, in numbers that defined the decade's mid-size segment as thoroughly as the Impala defined the full size. Number 1. Chevrolet full-size line, Impala and Caprice. Chevrolet's full-size line led American car sales in 1971, 1972, 1973, 1977, 1978, and 1979. No other nameplate was more consistently present in American driveways across the full span of the decade. The full-size Chevrolet was, for much of the 1970s, the default American car. The vehicle families bought when they needed seating for 5 or 6, when they towed a boat, when they drove distances that made the Pinto's economy irrelevant relative to the Impala's comfort. The 1977 downsizing, reducing the car's weight by approximately 700 pounds and its length by a foot, reinvigorated sales at the exact moment when fuel economy had become a purchase criterion even for full-size buyers. In 1977, more than 650,000 Impala and Caprice trim levels were sold. The most popular individual configuration was the Caprice Classic Sedan, with over 212,000 units that year. For any American who grew up in the 1970s, the Impala requires no introduction. It is the car in the driveway, idling in the school pickup line, filling every parking lot in every state for the full decade, the most universal automotive experience the decade produced.